Indeed.
Hey everyone, my guest today is Georgis Stitt. Georgis Stitt is an award-winning composer, lyricist, music producer, pianist, and activist. Her original musicals include Snow Child, Big Red Sun, Samantha Spade, Ace Detective, The Danger Year, The Big Boom, The Water, Common Ground, and Mosaic. Georgia has released 4 albums of her music: A Quiet Revolution, My Lifelong Love, This, and Alphabet City Cycle. She is currently at work on a new album of theatrical art songs and an oratorio called The Circling Universe. Georgia is the founder and president of Maestra Music, an organization that provides support, visibility, and community for women and non binary theater musicians. And through that work, she has inspired me so much to have her on the podcast. We'll get into that. She's also worked in the music departments on projects like the Broadway revival of Parade, NBC's The Sound of Music Live, the film version of The Last 5 Years, Sweet Charity with Sutton Foster, Disney ABC's Once Upon a Mattress with Tracy Ullman and Carol Burnett, and the recent Netflix film 13 the Musical. In her 8 years living in LA, she worked for America's Got Talent, Clash of the Choirs, and Grease, You're the One That I Want. This is a woman who wears many hats. We're going to get to know so much more about her today. Welcome, Georgia Stitt, to the podcast. Hello.
Hi, hello. I have to say, I hope everyone can have the experience someday of someone reading your bio to you because it is, as you were reading that, I was like, oh, I did do that. Oh, yeah, no, that's true. I did do that. It's a nice, this is your life moment.
Well, by the way, this is like a thumbnail sketch of your life. I had to whittle it down to sort of greatest hits because I wanted to spend my time talking to you and not just reading about
Not just
you.
reading my bio. Sure, I
Yeah.
understand that.
But it is sort of an extraordinary body of work, and it sort of drives down many different lanes, with the umbrella heading being music and
That's
George's.
exactly right.
Um, Also, we met when Jason Robert Brown, your husband, was doing Songs for a New World at City Center. I did a live event with him afterwards. And it was so clear to me that it was two people coming together who share so much love of music, but one person from a more classical background and one person from a more musical theater background. And it seems like you guys keep crisscrossing each other, but sharing this passion. And I know your daughters are also sometimes involved because during COVID, your family brought a lot of joy by sharing your lives at home in honor of supporting different organizations. But we got to see sort of the Brown
Oh,
Ditts at home, and it kind of reminded me of when I can't remember who would do it. In We saw it in the movie Maestro when like Leonard Bernstein is interviewed at home. I can't remember the great news reporter right now who used to do it, but I feel like COVID gave us those little slice of life's moment. Um, so anyway, thank you for sharing so much of yourselves, not just your music. Now to you. Can you share a little bit after that preamble of my, it's not stalking, Georgia. I just admire you. Totally fine. What was like the beginning, the kernel, like who introduced you to the piano?
who introduced me to the piano? When I was 7, maybe 6, I had a babysitter, and my mother used to drop me at her house, and the babysitter had a piano. And so when my mom came to pick me up, the babysitter would say, "She has spent all of her time just plunking out melodies at the piano. She's clearly musical." And so that was the beginning of maybe we should have piano lessons. And I remember my dad at some point said, if you're really good someday, we'll get you a grand piano. And by the time I was 14, I was playing Beethoven sonatas and I was playing piano in my church. I grew up in the South, and my dad was like, huh, I think I have to make good on this promise. And so he found an old grand piano, baby grand piano in an attic. And he himself was a woodworker. And so he refurbished the outside and he hired a piano technician to refurbish the inside. And that was a piano that I grew up on in high school. But it was really, because I had been playing on a little spinet, something that we just had in the house while I was learning. And then my dad made good on that promise. Like I guess if you're really going to do this, we should get you an instrument. So
Is
that
that
was wonderful. And it was
piano?
also a project for him. He loved that he made it. He was able to participate in making it.
That's so beautiful. It
Or, you
is
know,
where do you know where that piano is today?
well, it stayed in my family for a long time, but when all the children left and life went on, it's been sold. It's in North Georgia somewhere where someone bought it. But we got a lot of good years out of it. Interestingly, for anyone who's a musician, will find this interesting. When I went to college and majored in music, I studied piano, and that first year, my freshman year, my teacher identified a lot of bad habits that I had as a pianist. And when I came home for Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever it was, I discovered that my bad habits were because of the instrument, like the limitations of the instrument. I was like, oh, the reason I do that is because this instrument doesn't respond. So it was a really great, beautiful gesture, a good instrument for me to be 14 to 18 years old and learning the piano. But by the time I was becoming a professional pianist, it was a limited instrument. So I loved it for the craftsmanship and the story of it, but it wasn't the piano that I needed to carry with me for the rest of my life.
Okay, as a non-pianist, can
Yep.
you explain, and maybe other people listening, some are and some are not, when you like, I can think of bad habits in my life, but they're not connected to how I play the instrument. So, can you
Sure.
give an example of what you mean by a bad habit that you discovered?
Well, let me put it in sort of a metaphor. Like if you are a person who sprains your ankle, you might find that for the next few weeks, you put a lot of weight on the other side of your body to accommodate for the fact that you're not putting weight on, like you're putting weight on your left side because you can't put weight on your right ankle. And then when your body heals, your muscles are out of alignment because you've adjusted. And so there are things like when you touch the keys of a keyboard, the way that those keys respond is called the action of the instrument. And so if you have a hard action or a soft action or fast action or slow action, like how the instrument responds to you playing it will change the way your muscles work. And so there might be places where I was playing too hard or playing too soft or using too much muscle to try to get a sound. And then when I was playing on a better instrument, my teacher would say, you don't have to work so hard, or you have to work harder, or I don't know why you're accommodating that way when this instrument will respond to you. And it wasn't until I got home that I was like, oh, this is why I do that. Because
That is
when I play
so
that way on this
fascinating.
piano, I can't get any sound out of it.
Right, that's incredible. So when you went to, wait, did you go to Vanderbilt?
I did. I went to Vanderbilt.
Okay, so at Vanderbilt, I mean, as an undergrad, was there a music conservatory program that you were a part of?
Yes. Yes. Vanderbilt has the Blair School of Music. So, Vanderbilt is a university. So there are the College of Arts and Sciences and the College of Engineering. And so I was in the College of Music. And so I was a music theory and composition major and was writing from freshman year. But but my major instrument was piano. And I know how to play a lot of other instruments at a very basic level. But I am quite a accomplished pianist. And so I played piano all the way through at the level of the piano majors, but I didn't want to be a solo pianist. I didn't want to like do a solo piano recital. So I found myself accompanying a lot of other people. I would play like if it was a cellist giving a recital, I would learn the piano part for all the cello repertoire and play. The two of us would do a recital together. And so for 8 semesters at school, that was sometimes it was a job, sometimes I did it for credit, but I got to know a lot of the classical repertoire. I played for all the violists. I learned all the viola repertoire, if you even knew there was solo viola repertoire. But I played like those concertos over and over again because I knew them. But I actually think I'm telling you all this because it was relevant to me understanding. I loved making the music, but I didn't want to be the person everyone was looking at. I didn't want to be the soloist. I didn't want to be the one they were watching. I wanted to be the one supporting the one that they were watching. And so that I think was the beginning of me getting into music directing, getting into vocal coaching. Now I music direct. I play for a lot of singers, and I much prefer if like Kate Baldwin and I perform together a lot. And if we're on stage together, you're watching Kate. And you're supposed to be watching Kate. And I might catch her eye for a minute, but mostly I'm there to be in duet with Kate. And if Kate goes away and I'm alone on stage, I'm like, wait, 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 wait. Why are you looking at me?
Why do you think that is?
That's a good question. Now that I'm in therapy in this moment, you're my therapist. I think I would guess it's because there's more pressure. I feel like if you're only watching me and I make a mistake, that your brain is thinking, oh, she made a mistake, or oh, I don't like what she's wearing, or oh, she needs a haircut, or, whatever your insecurities are about being looked at. And none of that shows up for me if I'm there in support of someone else. I just think, she's taking a little more time here, so I'll take a little more time here. She's breathing, I'll give her space to breathe. And I feel like I'm in service of someone else instead of drawing the attention.
Right? Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
So for many, many years, like the first part of your life, you were in service of other composers and other musicians, but at a certain point, you went from like being a very classically oriented person to like going to grad school for musical theater writing. So
Yep.
when did a love for or even exposure to musicals come into your life?
You're asking such smart questions. I really am enjoying this. Thank you.
I'm so glad.
I have an answer for that. I was studying classical music, and after my sophomore year in college, my conducting teacher said, I do summer stock theater every summer on Cape Cod. It's the College Light Opera Company. They do 9 shows in 11 weeks. Some of it is operetta, Gilbert and Sullivan and The Merry Widow and Desert Song and things like that. And a lot of it is Guys and Dolls and you know, Brigadoon and, the great American musical theater canon. But we need a rehearsal pianist and I'm conducting. Would you like to come and be the rehearsal pianist? And that sounded like a lot of fun to me, a fun way to a summer job. But I was not a person who grew up knowing what summer stock was or aspiring to go do summer stock. But while I was there, I remember, some of them are classical scores, some of them are jazz scores. They're all notated differently. They come from different publishing companies. They look different on the page. And as I was playing all of them, I was thinking, how do you become the person who writes the musical? Like this is somebody had to write these. And so I found myself being a student of musical theater that summer. And I don't want to make it sound like I had never seen musicals or done musicals. I did musicals in high school and that sort of thing. But that was the summer that I thought, wow, somebody wrote this. You can be a composer of musical theater. What would that look like? And also the people that I was working with were in the industry. So that conducting teacher was John Morris Russell, who is now the conductor of the Cincinnati Pops Orchestra. And my fellow music staff member was Eric Whitaker, who is now a big choral music composer. And several of the other people that were in the company are actors and musicians that are still working in the industry. And so we all became this posse of, people who were going to move to New York and really do it. But that was also where I learned how scores get made and that someone had to write them. So I came home. I went back to Vanderbilt and I thought, I want to do this.
And you figured out how to do it. Had you traveled much growing up? Like even going to Cape Cod? I know what Cape Cod is because I live in New York City and you just drive up the eastern seaboard and
That's
you get
right.
there. But like, first of all, it's so beautiful.
It's so
But
beautiful.
it looks so different than Atlanta and the area that you grew up in. Like, was that, sort of meeting those people? Did you travel a lot growing up? Were you exposed to a lot of different places?
I did travel a lot by the standards of the 80s, when I was growing up. It's very different. My children have certainly traveled more now than I traveled when I was their age. But
They
um,
are not dressing up to get on an airplane.
No, but we did, didn't we?
Right.
Um, no, but I had not been to Cape Cod before, but I had seen a lot of the country. I didn't travel internationally until college, but then I got very hungry to see the world. No, well, that's not true. I had been to Mexico, to like Cancun with my family. But no, I hadn't seen a lot of the world yet, but we certainly, did road trips and drove around and I had, seen the ocean, had been to, um, mostly in the South, South Carolina and Florida, and down to New Orleans, and had family in a lot of places, family in Seattle and family. So I think maybe because our family was spread out, we did travel a lot. I was on a lot of airplanes, but not compared to the way people travel now.
Right. So what was the first Broadway show that you saw?
The first Broadway show that I saw was Phantom of the Opera. I saw three, and so it's sometimes hard for me to remember which, like there were three in a row, which one was first. I think that I saw Phantom of the Opera, Crazy for You, and it might have been the Guys and Dolls revival, if those were the same season, the Faith Prince one. But Phantom of the Opera was the first one that I saw, and it was spring break of my freshman year in college, the
Okay.
first time I saw a Broadway show.
Okay. I just had Peter Gallagher recently on
Oh
the
yeah.
podcast, and I was like, you have no idea. You have no idea. He was so dreamy, and he is a really dreamy performer. But I
He
was
is.
like,
I do know him. Yes, I know. Yes, he is dreamy. That's
yes.
right.
I just was like, I think that's part of why I fell in love with musical theater. So thank you, Peter Gallagher. Um, the idea of now in earnest sort of pursuing this thing of writing this thing, I would imagine is also connected to Maestra and amplifying sort of this activist role you've taken on in making sure that more women who love composing, who love playing, who want to be in orchestras, who want to write, all the things
Oh,
have opportunities. So when you were in, when you were sort of having an awakening as an artist and suddenly writing and looking for like, well, who are the women who came before me? How did your grad program work on that with you, for you, or were you like, hey, are there female teachers or non-binary teachers at the time? Like, how are you coming to terms with, I want to do this thing and I don't see a lot of other people who have come before me leading the way? Or maybe you did.
yeah. It's sometimes hard to think in retrospect about it. You know, in undergrad, all of my music teachers were men. My childhood piano teacher was a woman, and she was a really great role model. I had a female band director in the marching band, which I now recognize was unusual in high school. I in college, all my music teachers were men, but there were women. They just on different instruments. You know, one of the things we'll get into is that instruments are socially gendered. You know, like you'll find more women that play the flute or the harp or the cello, and more men that play the trumpet and the trombone and the bass. And really, when you think about them, it's like the higher instruments tend to be more female, and the lower instruments tend to be more male. And that's weird, but that is socially how it is. But so there were women teachers, and like there was a dean of the music school that was a woman. So it's not that I didn't see women in leadership, but I never had a female composition teacher. I never had anyone, a theory or composition teacher that was a woman. And then in grad school, I went to the NYU musical theater writing program, and the head of the program was Sarah Schlesinger, who is a woman, a lyricist. So I don't remember feeling the absence of women. Oh, in college, the music composition department brought in composers in residence every year, and I remember there were two of us undergrads, two women that were music composition majors, and my professors were very aware of that, and so they brought in like Ellen Taves Willich and some trying to remember who else, a few other Joan Tower, that were classical female composers just so that there would be role models, you know, just because they acknowledged that we didn't have those people on faculty. And so what I'm getting at is I don't remember feeling like, wow, there are no women doing this because I saw them. There were.
Right.
It was really through the music directing world when I started music directing. You know, I was getting my master's degree at NYU in musical theater writing, and I was on the composer track. But I was also writing lyrics, and Sarah Schlesinger saw that, and she was like, "You're a lyricist. You should not think of this as a secondary thing. You actually are a lyricist." And but as a music director, I was often the only woman on the team. I was often in rooms where the whole creative team was men. And there were even, you know, these stories that are shocking stories. Like I remember one time being at the piano and someone came in and asked when the music director was going to arrive, assuming that I was a rehearsal pianist or the assistant. And I was like, no, I'm the music director. And they were like, oh. And times when I conducted and people came up from the audience and said, we've never seen a female conductor before. You know, so those were the more illuminating moments where I thought, huh, there is a disparity here. And then when I started getting commissioned as a writer, all of my early commissions came from women artistic directors. And I was like, that is interesting that they see a potential that I had not been able to crack before. I had not been able to get those commissions before. And there's no, I can't point to quantifiable evidence that says that's a gender thing necessarily. It just felt like it was. It felt like the women saw me, two of them in particular, in a way that the industry had not seen me yet.
I mean, you're also married to a man who does similar things in the same business. Well, how, where did you and Jason meet?
I auditioned for Jason and got the gig of wife. No, that's a funny line, but
You
uh
were up against a few people and you really knocked it out of the
nailed
park with the
it.
combat.
Um, the no, I auditioned for Parade. I auditioned to be the pianist of Parade. This was in 99, I think, and I'd been a couple years out of grad school and I wanted to go out on tour. I'd never been on tour, and Mark Sindroff is my lawyer, and I called Mark Sindroff and I said, "What shows are staffing up? What's going out on the road? I think that would be good for me to get some of that experience." And he listed off a bunch of shows, and one of them was Parade. And I was like, "Oh, I loved Parade. I would love to work on Parade. Really? They're looking for a music director?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll put you in touch with Jason. Jason's my client." So Mark wrote a letter to Jason that we still have, and it was like, "My client Georgis Stitt would like to music direct the national tour of Parade. Can I put the two of you in touch?" And Jason wrote back and said, "Well, there's not a job available because I'm going to music direct the tour of Parade." And I thought, why? You're the composer. Why are you going to do that? And the answer was at the time that he needed to make money. He could make more money music directing the show on the road than he could for having written it. Um, and I was
Welcome to
like,
theater, folks.
I know, welcome to the theater. And so I wrote back and I said, well, I mean, does he need a pianist? Does he need an assistant? What is, anyway, so I wound up auditioning for him and got the job. And it was, the longer version of the story is that it was before really we were emailing things to each other. So I went and picked up an envelope full of the sheet music and brought it home and started practicing it and realized it was harder than I had thought it was going to be. And I think this was like a Thursday or Friday and my audition was on Monday. And I remember canceling every appointment for the weekend, thinking like, I have to practice. I
Right.
have to really, really nail this. And I did, but I just remember thinking, okay, this one's going to be a challenge. And it was, but also, that experience for me lifted me into another level, both as a musician and career-wise. I was now playing for Hal Prince, and um, it was I was in a different room, a different kind of room than I'd
Wow.
been in before.
So wait, if he was doing it himself, as it were, what were you actually hired to do then?
Oh, he was the conductor, and
Right.
I was the pianist. And then
Okay.
Tom Murray, who is Jason's music director, was also on the road with us. So that was the hierarchy: Jason, then Tom, then me, and then we were the music department.
Wow. And so you had your first experience of touring with a show and sort of
Yep,
learning what that is, falling
yep,
in love, playing this incredible music. And I love that you
yep.
have the letter, but you're also seeing, as you are now in relationship with a man in this business, did you feel like there was a pulling your hair out of kind of going like, why are things working this way for him and not for me? Did it not feel like compare and despair? Did you feel like it was all thriving for you because of that job? What, when you think back to that time,
Those are really, yeah, I love how deep you're going. Um, I mean, I will say, I'll start with like in the 25 years that we've been together, I have seen a lot of the kinds of calls that Jason gets that I have never gotten.
right?
But also, by the time I met him, he had a Tony Award, so there was no sense of professionally we're on equal footing and you're getting things that I'm not getting.
Right.
Professionally, he was so far ahead of me. And so I think I assumed that a lot of the things that were coming his way were because of his experience and because of his exposure and because of the world knew what he could do and they had not yet seen what I can do. Musically, I think it took us a while to figure out that we were equals, that and we worked on that show, the tour of Parade, and when that tour ended, we were dating. And I remember having a conversation where we both said, we're either going to date or I'm going to be your music assistant. Like it can't be both. It can't be that we're in a rehearsal situation and you can give me notes, but I can't give you notes. Like that's not, I don't want to be in that relationship. And so for decades, we didn't work together at all, and we said, if the phone rings, we're either like, this is for you or this is for me. But it wasn't like, well, maybe we could do this together. And
Right.
then by the time we had kids and we owned houses and, we were like, well, maybe now we could try where, we didn't I think what I'm getting at is we worked really, really hard to make sure that we weren't competing with each other, that we took that out, that I could just clap for him and he could just clap for me.
That's incredible. And I know it's hard to do every single day perfectly, but just for people listening, don't run away from someone for the wrong reasons or the right reasons. If it's about this very thing, because it is really hard and it is, to clap for someone else. And this is even true of friends, right? I mean, it is so hard to not be looking right and left all the time. And if you're
Hmm.
living with it on the day to day, it's really an incredible thing to work on because it allowed you to have a beautiful personal life by not shying
Yeah.
from that.
Yeah. I won't say that it hasn't crept in,
Of
that it's not a
course.
thing that we continue to deal with, but at least we named it in the beginning and we can when it does show up, we can acknowledge what it is and sort of tackle it together.
Right. It's incredible. Well, it's very inspiring. So thank you for sharing that. I know it's not just about your organization, so I know
Oh,
that is very
sure.
personal, but I really thank you because I think how to navigate a life in the arts, period, regardless, is just a challenge. And so to hear kind of like, well, here's how we do it, try this, is always a great thing. And I really appreciate it. I want to talk about Maestra,
Yay.
Amplify, because it's such a stunningly beautiful organization filled with glorious human beings who have worked together to create literally a database of gloriously talented women and non-binary musicians and people who are part of the musical theater. So can you talk a little bit about literally how does this roster of names work? Um, Sort of what are the day-to-day applications of this glorious, glorious thing that you shepherded into the world?
Thanks. I'll start with the shepherding part. I music directed the off-Broadway production of Sweet Charity in 2019, 2020. And and Lee Silverman was the director of that piece, and she said in order to revive this, famously hooker with a heart of gold story, she had to figure out what its contemporary relevance might be. And so she thought an interesting take on it would be that Charity moves differently when she's out in the world looking for love than when she's in the safety of her dressing room with her co-workers, the dance hall hostesses with her. And since the band was going to be visible on stage, she said, I want the band to be like her safe space with her girlfriends in her dressing room. And she sings a lot of her solo numbers there. And since the band's going to be there, can we have an all-female band? And we'll put them in costume and that sort of thing. So that dramaturgical reason propelled me to look for women musicians. Like I was one of them. So there were five other musicians. Mary Mitchell Campbell was working with me on this project. She was the orchestrator and music supervisor. And we couldn't find these musicians. We called the contractors that we know, and they were like, "Oh, you need a guitarist, call this woman." And we were like, "Well, she's playing on Broadway right now. She's already got a job. She's not going to leave her Broadway job to come do an off-Broadway job. Who else?" And they were like, "Oh no, she's the one we call." I was like, "She's the only one? She's the only female guitarist in all of New York City?" Um, and it took us a long time, months to find the women. And when we finally found them, I had a spreadsheet that I had started of like, this woman plays this instrument. Here's her contact information. She's not available. It's not available. She's on tour. She's out of town. She's, whatever. Um, but then people heard about that and they started calling me and saying, I hear you like have a list of like all the female bass players in New York. And I thought, well, I don't want to be the keeper of that list. So I called the guys that built my website, my personal website, and I was like, can we build a little database and just have these women put themselves in the database and give some search filters so that like if you're looking for a bass player in New York City who plays both upright and electric and is a member of the Musicians Union, you can put in those filters and their profiles will come up and then you can contact them. I can get out of the way. And so our first beta test of that directory had, I always say it was 22 people. I don't know where that number came from. It was less than 50 people at the beginning, fewer than 50 people. And then I started reaching out to people and being like, hey, I started this thing, put yourself in the Maestro directory. And it has grown and grown and grown. Maestro turned into a not-for-profit organization. We have a board of directors. We have all this external programming. We just hired an executive director. And there are 2,700 people in the directory now. It's global, like sort of anywhere that there's theater, you can use those filters. So if you're like, I've seen it, somebody's like, we're doing my show out of town in San Diego. They just gave me the roster of musicians. They're all men. I'd love to hire some women to balance out this orchestra pit. Do you have any recommendations? And I'm like, type in Southern California, type in what instrument you're looking for, see who comes up, call them. I can't, I have deliberately stayed out of the business of recommending people. I don't want to be a contractor. I don't want to say, well, if you want electric, it's this person, but if you want upright, it's this person. I don't want us to do that. We're trying to answer the question of they don't exist. There are no female drummers in Tennessee. There are no, whatever it is. All harp players are women. No, that's not, well, that's a bad example because what we're doing is showcasing the women, but you know what I mean? Like all
Yeah.
bass trombone players are men. No, they're not. Here are some women who do that. And so the practical applications are for people who are looking to diversify pits. We serve women and non-binary people. We have a partner organization called Muse, which is Musicians United for Social Equity, and uh, it's the same demographic of musicians, but it serves specifically people of color. And so we what's the word? We offered our web designers to that organization so that our two directories are they're alike, they mirror each other. So you can look for women, non-binary people, people of color, and then there's another organization called Tempo that has grown up that's for trans and gender non-conforming musicians. So the musician community is rallying to, the musicians union did a survey of the demographic. The New York City Musicians Union did a survey during the pandemic, and 22% of the people who hold chairs on Broadway are women. So that's a small minority. That's not anywhere near parity. And so I guess the thing I try to say when I talk about this publicly is I'm not in the business of putting men out of work. My favorite musicians, many of my favorite musicians are men, including my husband, including my husband's band, including a lot of the musicians that I play with all the time. They are great musicians. But I don't want to be job after job after job after job where I'm the only woman on the bandstand. And so there are other people who can do this, and I want them to be seen, and I want the industry to know they exist and hire them.
Well, drop the mic. I mean, that's it. Really, it's incredible. And men aren't going anywhere. It's not going to be a problem, I assure you. But I do feel like this is such a beautiful service. I have a quick kind of granular question before I let you go, which is, as a performing artist, getting into unions, there's all sorts of routes in. When I started, you had to do a show that was equity to become equity, or you would get points in summer stock, to your point. Now
Mhm.
there are buy-ins to certain unions to get it going. How
Mm.
difficult is it to get into the music union that we're talking about to play on Broadway or off Broadway? Is that a really challenging journey?
It's not. It's very different. I mean, even when I learned how actors had to do it, I was surprised. To be in the musicians union, someone will correct me. I think you just pay. I think you just join. I think you
Join.
just pay and
Okay.
join. There's no reason to join until you are actually working at a certain level. And so I joined in college. I think I can't even remember what that is. I was offered a job and they were like, you have to be union. And I was like, okay, I'll join the union.
Got
And
it.
it was a few $100s, you know. And then I transferred that union musician membership everywhere that I moved. But when I came to New York, New York is such a union town. Like if you are playing Broadway or off Broadway, even subbing, even assisting, you have to be a member of the union. And so there is a moment where somebody's like, "Hey, do you want to work on the show? You're in the union, right?" And I've certainly heard stories of people being like, "Yes," and then before 5 o'clock they go over and write a check, and then by tomorrow they're in the union. Um,
That
Someone
sounds
from the
quick.
union might correct me and be like, well, it's not quite that simple, but that's my understanding of it, is that you don't have to jump through the hoops that actors have to jump through.
All right. Well, this is so incredible. Also, just to be around all of the beautiful people who, Sarah Bareilles and Jessica Vosk and Kate Baldwin and on and on and on. I also was exposed at your event to like the star of Real Women Have Curves. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to go see that show. Like it was really an extraordinary, celebratory, empowering evening. And obviously, so much so that here we are, because I can't stop thinking about just the ways in which people can go about their lives doing what they love and then also help open doors for others. It's a really, really beautiful, beautiful thing that you do alongside all of the beautiful music that you put into the world. I read at the beginning in George's bio, many of the albums that are out that you can listen to. Her storytelling as a songwriter are so universally welcoming and just tell the story of what it is to be in love, to want things, to have hopes, to have challenges. You're just such a glorious storyteller. And so we didn't even get into how much I love your work and can't wait to see more of it and listen to more of it. And you are just such a glorious artist. And I'm so honored to have had this time with you. And thank you for being here. And before I let you go, is there a little known fact about Georgis Stitt that you can share?
I was thinking about this because I know that this is what you do. A little known fact. I mean, I thought that I would drop some of the music things that, like in the marching band, I learned how to play every instrument. So I'm facile. Like I can't perform on them, but I do know like how to make sound and what the notes are on all the instruments in the marching band. But I have talked about that in podcasts and interviews before. So I think the fact that I have never told anyone publicly that I will tell you is that when I was in the sixth grade, I won an ice cream eating competition. And it is a thing that I carry with pride and shame.
That's not easy to do.
I cannot even imagine how my parents let me do that or why I thought it would be a good idea to win it. But I won an ice cream eating competition.
Georgia State, I am so proud of you. And that is all I'm going to say. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for being on the podcast today. What a wonderful time I've had. I cannot wait to see you again in performance and all you do.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. Okay. We